G'day, I'm Luke Bateman, and this is In the Good Books. This is a podcast where we dive into the most incredible stories ever told and talk about the books which have left lasting impressions on you long after the cover closes. If you're a book nerd, you'll love this podcast. If you've always wanted to get into reading and books but never understood the hype or where to start, you're in the right place. Or if you're simply someone who enjoys a good story, you're welcome here too. Let the adventures begin. First off for the episode, we have got a listener audio from Adam, which I'm so pumped to be hearing from a male.
Hey Luke, very cool you're doing this. Really cool you're talking about fantasy, and really cool that I now get to talk about one of my favorite fantasy books, which is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. Probably the book that I'm most excited to share with my kids if I end up having them in the future. In fantasy, I think we often see wizards as being these incredibly powerful and incredibly wise characters who we just end up assuming have always been that way. But this is the story about how a wizard could become like that and what mistakes they could make along the way that could inform that journey. I think it's just such an absolutely beautiful world where dragons even aren't meant to be defeated, they're meant to be understood, and the entire way that magic works in this world is by reaching a greater understanding of things and knowing the true name of things. And that's even reflected in the main struggle of the book, which is one of self-knowledge and self-mastery. And personally, as someone who's kind of struggled with the choices that I've made in my life and a little bit with my mental health, it's a story that means a lot to me, and it meant a lot to me when I first read it. It's got so much clarity, so much wisdom, some absolutely beautiful and staggering moments. And I think overall it's probably helped me more than most self-help books, if I'm honest. It's an absolute classic that I think for some reason has kind of been forgotten or people don't really know about as much, but they absolutely should. That's A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin.
Okay. That is such an amazing voice memo. Thank you, Adam. Firstly, thank you for your courage to share that. Thank you for your just such a beautiful, beautiful piece on fantasy books. I think you should be hosting this podcast, not me. There's a number of things I want to touch in from that audio. Firstly, what really jumps out to me is knowing the true names of things. I think that's something that is sprinkled through high fantasy often, and it's, having power or power coming from the real name of something. And that's something I think about all the time, because I think it's one of the coolest sort of magic, or I suppose parts of a magic system to me. Is the true name of something having so much power, and it really resonates with me in real life, because I think in my head sometimes I'm like, imagine if I have like my name's Luke, but imagine if I had like a true name, where if someone knew that, they'd have like some sort of power over me. Yeah, I've really loved that, and I love the sort of the idea of things having their their true names beneath them. It's such a beautiful thing. And the other thing that you spoke about was, we see wizards as these really powerful men, and by the time we get to them in books, or most of the time, I suppose, that we get to them in books, they're already who they are, but we don't ever see their journey or their struggle or how they became who they are. And that's probably, like, for me, I think my favorite book, or one of my favorite books, Magician, actually follows that story. It might be similar. I actually haven't read Wizard of the Earthsea, but after your audio, I'm absolutely going to do it, because it sounds to me a bit like my favorite book, Magician by Raymond E. Foss, where you actually start with the main character as a child who doesn't even know magic, and then you follow his journey as he becomes this really, really powerful wizard. And that's the thing about books, and the thing about fantasy is, you read that as a young boy or even a man. That was always what I loved so much. And I was 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, and I felt like those characters in the beginning. I felt powerless, and I felt like there was this big journey, this big quest ahead of me, where I would transform into somebody, and they were always my role models. Like I was always like, oh, I can't wait to go on this massive quest and gain all these powers and go through all these hardships and end up as the all conquering wizard. Like that's what I love about fantasy, because it instills in you that belief. Those stories instill in you the belief that you can do that, and you walk side by side with these characters, and you gain so much confidence and belief in yourself that is also going to be your journey from, young weak boy or young weak child to all powerful, all conquering being, and not in a tyrannical way, in a very magical and loving way. So I really like that aspect, and also you touched on the fact that this book gave you more self-development and personal growth and self-help books do, and that is what I've been telling people for so long, is that fantasy books or fictional books, there's so much more than the stories, that there's so much more than just a made-up story. We have role models in these books, and you have values and characteristics and morals and ethics presented to you in these books that are so desirable, and things that we desperately want in our world today and desperately lack in our world today. And we have these characters in fantasy books who portray all these, who are strong men and women that we can aspire to be like. And if you go deeper than just a story of magical beings in a made-up world, there's just so much that we can take away from these books. And truly, even during, I'm so thankful that you shared your struggles, because I openly share my struggles. And when I was trying to help myself, fantasy books gave me just as much healing and as much power to change as the books about the issues I was dealing with, and the self-help books that led me to some tools and frameworks to live a better life. So I love that. I'm so blown away by that audio. I love it so much, and I'm so thankful that you sent that in. And that book, Wizard of the Earthsea, is literally going straight to the top of my TBR right now, because it sounds incredible. I can't wait to read it, and that's just, I love this so much. This is what this podcast has now introduced me to, a book that I have never even heard of, and it's changed someone's life, and that is the power of books. Everyone listening, that's what books do. That's the power of them right there. That's their magic happening right here in real time. And also, Adam, I want to say thank you, because you have set me up perfectly to dive into the subject of today's podcast, which is epic fantasy, my bread and butter. It's where my journey of reading started. It's what I love the most. It's where I go whenever I just want to reconnect with myself or feel good. It's where I go when I want to smile, is straight to high fantasy. That's exactly where I go. And I want to take you back to a young boy on a farm with a wild imagination and just all the make-believe that he used to play as a kid. And I always felt, I remember, it was funny, I remember when I'd jump on my trampoline, and I was always I was just at home with my family, but I was always so alert and looking around to make sure that my sister or my brother wasn't watching me or wasn't listening to me, because I was just if I heard someone walk out onto the veranda, if I heard some noise, I'd pull up, because I'd be I can't, no one can see me or hear me playing this make-believe game or playing this make-believe person in my head. So that, and that was where a lot of the, I suppose, shame built for me. And that was once again, it was nobody's fault but my own, and it was only my own perception that I didn't want to be seen as this strange kid playing, make-believe on his trampoline. So that is where my reading began and my love for fantasy began, because then when I was reading these stories, I would live as the characters in epic fantasy stories, and I would become them. And when I was reading the books, they were who I was. This character, what they were going through was me going through those things. And why I think that this is the best genre, and it's just in my humble opinion, and my opinion is not always worth all that much, but epic fantasy was just, it wasn't just a story and it wasn't just a book. It was an entire world. Like when you open those pages, you are transported to a different world, and it's just so, just so incredible to be able to have this full sensory experience and getting lost in this whole world. And like time just you just lose track of time because you're just in this complete other place. I think that that's the power that fantasy books have, and I don't find that same power in other books, and that's why it's my favorite genre. And it's the characters in these stories. I live real life. I live real life every day. I don't want to go and read about real life. Like these characters, they're never perfect. They're always flawed. They're always aspiring to have something, or they feel broken inside. And I think that we all as humans can relate to that and connect with that. And we watch these characters in fantasy novels grow and go through their power, or discover their magic, or find magic and fight and battle these massive evil forces. And what it does is it instills that same belief that we can do that in ourselves. And you follow these characters from childhood into adulthood, and in stories you can follow multiple generations of families throughout entire sagas that just blows me away. I'm always so blown away when authors, can stretch centuries and generations of people, and it's so cool how they weave them all together. And it's so important. This genre is so important to us all because it serves as such a powerful mirror for ourselves, and it allows us to explore complex moral, political, and situational issues and experiences, and we have that safe distance from them, and we can work out how to navigate them for ourselves. And even if we disagree with how they're navigated in the book, we can think to ourselves, well, I would have navigated it this way, and I think that would have created a better outcome. Or we see these characters in books react in a certain way, and we see what the outcome of that is, and that gives us a pathway or a map for those same situations within our own lives. And epic fantasy reminds us to believe in something bigger than ourselves. There's this Arthur Brooks, who's one of my idols. He's a social scientist. He talks about how the happiest people, he studies happiness, and he talks about the happiest people make themselves small and they make the world big. And I think, that is what fantasy books does for us. It makes us so small and makes the universe around us so large. So you're not only just reading these fantastic stories, you're allowing yourself to generate happiness because you feel so, I don't want to say unimportant, because that's not the case. But you feel so minute in such a large galaxy, and that just frees you from all the constraints and all the pressure that you place on yourself every single day to achieve all the things that you want to achieve, when you can look at the world and just remember how big it is and remember how small you are. It's just so important for your happiness and just your outlook on life every single day. And they celebrate the power of courage and friendship and hope, and showing us how small groups together through friendship and determination and perseverance can conquer such massive forces and achieve such large things just by chipping away and standing beside each other. If you haven't read epic fantasy, I really want you to understand that these books aren't, they're not medieval books. It's not all swords and soldiers and castles. And even though they're inspired by our world and our history and places and ancient civilizations from our own world, what authors do with their imagination to build these worlds is phenomenal, and it's something that can't be told. It can only be experienced. And the characters in these books, they're not always Gandalfs. They're not always the all-conquering, all-powerful people. Most of the time, they're the small characters, and they're the anti-heroes. They're not the chosen ones destined for greatness. They're the young kids who have hardship and simply just want to overcome the smallest hardship within their life. If you look at Lord of the Rings, which was written, however long ago, and then you look at a man like Brandon Sanderson who writes epic fantasy today, how evolved the genre has become and how diverse the genre has become. It's truly breathtaking for me to see the evolution, and I'm so excited to see where it continues to go. And if you're wondering what the difference between fantasy and epic fantasy is, the way that I would describe it is that all carrot cake is cake, but not all cake is carrot cake. I don't know whether that makes sense to everybody, but fantasy is the overarching genre and it has so many different subsections, and epic fantasy is just one subsection of all fantasy. But epic fantasy really deals with those epic stories that involve different worlds. Epic fantasy is never set on Earth and never involves, modern day society. If you've never read any epic fantasy, here's what you can expect, and here's where to dive in and start with it. First off, you need to prepare for long-term investment. These are big books, and they're always a part of series. Very rarely do we have an epic fantasy book that's a standalone. There are obviously some amazing ones, but very rarely. They're usually a part of no less than trilogy, and my favorite saga, the Rift saga, is 31 books and still going. So be prepared for some time commitment. The pace of these books, because they're planned over multiple books, usually the pace and the world building of it is much slower than you would get in a standalone novel, because they've got so long to really just draw you in and thread the weaves together. So you want to be prepared that maybe the first 200, 300, 400 pages of the first book will be slow and you might not be as engaged as you'd hope, but believe me, when the penny drops, it will drop, and it will drop hard. So if you're looking to get started on epic fantasy, here are my 3 recommendations on the awesome places to start. The first one is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, one of my favorite books of all time. It has 2 characters, Fitz and the Fool, who I promise you, and I will refund any receipts for these books that you give me if you don't love them. My producer is waving at me no, so I rescind the refund, but you will love these characters. So that's Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. The second book is The Painted Man, or The Watered Man in America. I'm not sure it's Painted Man, Watered Man. I think there were some licensing issues there for Peter V. Brett. In Australia, it was The Painted Man. One of my favourite books of all time. Love this. The world and the magic system in this book are incredible, and I would say to everyone that is a must-read book. And the last book is Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. This is the first book of the Wheel of Time series. You may have seen the TV series of it, but the Wheel of Time is an epic saga that spans 13 or 14 books, don't quote me on that, and it is crowned as one of the all-time greats of epic fantasy. So that is another great place to start. Okay, now that I've stopped rambling about epic fantasy, I hope somewhere in that episode I convinced you to start the genre, or even just piqued your interest in the genre, because it is truly such an amazing place. Once again, I'd love to hear from you, or I want you to send a voice memo to our email, goodbooks@9.com.au, so we can talk about books, we can talk about stories. We had an amazing audio from Adam at the start of the podcast, and I just love that so much, and that's what I want to hear from all of you. As I always say, all I want to hear from you is the stories that never get told, the moments that we would never hear about, what books mean to you, or moments that you've shared with other people that will never ever get told. They are what I want to hear from you and what I want to talk about here and tell here. For any more details on it, just check the podcast notes below. It'll all be in there. Once again, I can't thank you enough for joining me on this episode of In the Good Books. I'm so overjoyed to be able to talk about magic and words with more and more people. I love you all. So grateful for all your magic and being here and listening to this. I'd genuinely be so grateful if you'd subscribe to In the Good Books by hitting the follow button in your podcast app. I'm already so excited for our next chat.